Five. In 3, 2, and 1, we are live. This is Across the Pond with Addy Ads. I have a new guest today. Instead of our usual guest, Mr. Sam Samworth, we have Mr. Jon Wedger, Scotland Yard detective. How are you doing, John?
Yeah, good, Ads. Yeah, all's well. Crazy times all around the globe, really.
Yeah, definitely. And I actually already interviewed Mr. Wedger. If anybody wants to see those clips, I will put them in the description box. But this is going to be really informal. What is the? I actually don't. Are you in London right now, Mr. Wedger?
Yeah. I'm in central London at the moment,
Okay.
and
What's the
yeah, no,
situation like?
it's um, it's bizarre because it's like a ghost town. It's just dead. I mean, I'm going about my business. I know some people might think that's the wrong thing to do, but I'm not buying it. I'm really not buying it at all. I find it the weirdest set of events going. I mean, the way I look at it, Ads, is that this government has never given a shit really for its old, its young, whoever, and now all of a sudden they're benevolent. It doesn't make any sense whatsoever. And I mean, when this is over, and God knows when that's going to be, what are we going to come back to? I mean, there'll be businesses going out that, one of the sacred institutions of the UK are our public houses, our pubs. I mean,
What do you mean by you're not buying it?
I just, I no doubt there is some sort of virus going around, that's making people ill. But this is the UK. We always get colds, If you live in the tropics, you'll get malaria. If you live in India, you'll get you'll get a dodgy stomach. If you live in the UK, you'll get a cold. But all of this panic, I don't know. It doesn't feel right. None of it feels right. And for the whole of London to be shut down the way it is just incredible. And what a good time to bury bad news. I mean, I went to do a live Facebook podcast from the city of London the other Sunday. I mean, it was probably on one of the busiest roads in Europe. And I was walking down the middle of the road. There was no cars. Wow. There were red buses. There were London buses, but they had no one in them.
Wow.
And it was just bizarre. But as soon as I went to do a podcast, Facebook wouldn't allow it, and I've been banned. I don't know why I've been banned, so I can't even post anything.
Yeah, I saw that. It says you got kicked off midstream, and now you can't post at all on your page.
Well, I can put like little sort of text posts on there.
Okay.
But anything, and the other thing is, you know what I do, but your followers over there might not know. I'm a former police detective, a former Metropolitan Scotland Yard police detective who specialised in child abuse, and became a whistleblower and was threatened and bullied and discredited and all sorts in an attempt to silence me for exposing child abuse cover-ups, child prostitution cover-ups. And now I campaign tirelessly to give justice to victims and survivors of child abuse. A couple of things that I was part of a group that organised what was going to be an absolutely monumental sort of date in the calendar of demonstrations, in as much as we'd organised a demonstration against child abuse, anti-child abuse, and the sort of attraction it was getting from all segments of the British community was unbelievable. We were getting, people from just the normal sort of like white Christian community, the Sikhs, the Muslims coming together, biker groups, military veterans, the fire brigade, taxi drivers, so many people were coming together for this one thing. And the police rang me last week and very polite, very respectful, but said, we know you're John. There's a few people in the office who've worked with you in the past. You've still got a lot of respect in our office, but if you go ahead with the demonstration, you will be arrested. We advise you, don't force us into a situation where that'll happen. Please back down. So I had no option but to back down. I was due to give evidence, a massive sort of milestone, really, in the British institution, they've got an independent investigation and inquiry into the sheer extent of all the cover-ups that have been occurring in the UK involving the church institutions,
And
various
you
children's
would have
homes.
been arrested because of the lockdown. Is that what they were saying?
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah,
and that was
yeah.
just last week.
Yeah, yeah. They classed what I was doing as honourable, and they said we will facilitate it when it's back and running. But it was
Yeah.
mid-May, and they said, look, it's still going to be locked down in mid-May, so they know something we don't. I was due to give evidence at the government inquiry, which was a government-backed inquiry into all the cover-ups around child abuse and child prostitution. That was going to be televised globally. That looks like it's going to be shut down. And in addition, Facebook has shut me down. So I'm pretty redundant at the moment. And in respect to child abuse, it's on the back burner. It's going nowhere.
Yeah, it does. As far as the COVID outbreak, it seems to be really good timing for the elites in that sense, because it does seem like the ring was closing in many senses. And now they have this basically excuse to put anything that is not the pandemic on the back burner, as you said.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at what's happening globally, we had the Epstein thing, over your part of the world, and the people he was linked into, and he was, as we would say, banged to rights. That was he was a guilty man, and and steps were taken accordingly to stop him speaking out, in my opinion. But that also then linked in with the British royal family, with Prince Andrew, again, trying to worm his way out of serious allegations involving young children, young girls. If we look at Prince Andrew's brother, Charles, the heir to the throne, in respect, he was exposed for his links with Jimmy Savile.
I've been actually, John, you might be proud of me. I've been working on my royal family history via the Netflix show called The Crown. I don't know if you've seen it, but and I don't know how accurate it is, but it seems to be somewhat accurate from the reviews I read. But I do know all the people you're talking about now, which to you it may seem like obvious, but for I would say most Americans couldn't name one person in the royal family other than the Queen. But Charles, as you said, is the heir apparent to the Queen's position.
Yeah, and Charles's best friend was a guy called Bishop Peter Ball. He was a bishop in the Anglican Church in the United Kingdom, and he was one of the highest clergymen in the Protestant Church. And this guy was just raping and sodomizing boys for many, many years. He was caught out. He was arrested. He got away with so much, and Charles stood by him all through it. The guy eventually did get convicted and did go to prison, and he's dead now. But Charles knew what was going on, and Charles covered it up. So, yeah, well worth sort of going in. Bishop Peter Ball, and the other guy that protected him was a guy called Archbishop George Carey. And George Carey has now sort of left the Anglican Church and has got a seat in the House of Lords. So they're just absolutely wretched people through and through. And it was coming out, it was really hemorrhaging. And now it's history. And unfortunately, like they say, justice delayed is justice denied. And it
Definitely.
will never, ever go back to how it was. Never. We were really, really moving forward. Yeah, this guy, George Carey, the head of the Anglican Church, the Protestant Church in the United Kingdom. And this guy was protecting a very, very wretched paedophile. He knew what was going on. And he was caught out at the government inquiry, which I'm due to I'm meant to be due to sitting on in a couple of weeks' time. And this guy here was caught out for covering up for Bishop Ball.
And Kerry is now
in the House of Lords. He's a
goodness.
lord, because we've got two strands to our political environment. We've got the House of Lords, who ultimately determine what laws are passed, and underneath them we've got the members of Parliament. They all frequent the same building, House of Parliament. However, the Lords is separate from the House of Commons, and it's even like the House of Lords have a red carpet, the Commons have a green carpet. They have their own bars and everything else. They have their own sort of halls where they meet, their meeting rooms. And
so last time I spoke with you, John, you actually, to my memory, if it serves me right, you actually didn't name anyone. So this is new for me that you are naming people to me.
Yeah. Well, this guy, it's a matter of public record. I mean, I've still not named anything to do with the case I'm involved with because it's due to go before a court. And if I do so, that's going to cause a lot of problems.
Of course,
it's prejudice, and it's going to cause the case to be thrown out. And I'm then going to be sanctioned by various liable writs. So I'm going to shut my gob on that. But certain people, you can speak out because it's public record. But these are vile individuals. I'm starting up. Well, I was in the process of a campaign to get this man removed from the House of Lords because he's perverted the course of justice. He's committed a criminal offence, and he's prevented the police from doing a proper investigation into the nefarious activities of his underling, Bishop.
John, what do you think? Because you're an expert on this, obviously, because of your background. And I would say that because of my time that I have spent talking with you, that I know more than the layman. So this question might sound a little stupid, but I just want to ask it so people listening will know. What do you think? What percentage of your populace do you think is aware of these sorts of facts, would you say?
Child abuse affects more people than we give it credit, or if credit is a word. There was an independent study done by a leading child psychiatrist and psychologist who reckon that child abuse probably affects a third of the population. So it's big, one way or the other. It affects a lot of people within the prison environment, and I think we're going to be talking about the prison environment.
Oh yeah, definitely, I agree. But as far as your population, do you think they're generally aware that most of your leaders are somehow? I don't want to say most, but a large group of your leaders are somehow tied to this group, this cabal.
Well, it's difficult because it's what do people value? What is their value system? Things are changing now. People no longer worship God, as it were. They worship their flat screen, their car, and everything else. So, and you look at the crap that people watch on the television. We've got a program called Love Island. I don't know if you've got a similar thing in the US.
I think so. Yeah,
it's just
a
load of morons, that are, trying to shag each other on an island, and people come home. Rush home to watch this. We got the Netflix and Freeview and soap operas and all the other sort of crap that was put on our screen as distraction. Yeah. So no one really is taking an interest in current affairs.
Yeah, I think this is a huge wake up call, don't you think, John, for society at large?
Yeah, what's happened. It's made people sort of really think about their morality and their mortality. I mean, I don't know the full ins and outs of what's going on because I'm not privy to sort of what the government briefings are, but there are people that are scared, and to see in such a short period of time, not just the UK or Europe, but the whole world locked away. I mean, I know that in Sweden and the Soviet country of Belarus, that they're just ignoring it and just carrying on as normal. And there's a lot of people here that carrying on as normal, but you're going to get in trouble sooner or later. The police are patrolling the streets in Spain. You're arrested and you face a heavy fine. But there's no one out working. How long is this going to go on for before we end up starving? It's it's serious.
Yeah, it's. I don't know. It seems to me that our leaders over here in the States are. I mean, they're not even one step ahead of this problem, and to say that they're behind it, I think would be an accurate statement as well. And I don't know if you saw this, but the Surgeon General of the United States stood in front of the country and said more or less that masks don't really do a whole lot and can actually make things worse in terms of getting infected by this virus, which is just utter nonsense.
Well, of course. I mean, look, if it's airborne, I mean, I don't know how it works, but I know how a cold works. Now, we're in the UK. We all get colds. Everyone gets them, and people die. My stepdad nearly died from flu. And if I went into work, especially when I was in the police, if I had a cold, I'd go in, and sure enough, there'd be a handful of people that have got the cold. I'd ring my mum up, and she'd say, "Oh, it's funny because my friend's got it. There's something going around." That's the saying. There's something going around, and the whole nation gets a cold at the same time. And we have a few days off work, and then we carry on as normal, and we don't get it for the rest of the year. I don't know anyone who's got this. I don't know anyone. I've heard of one girl that I sort of knew who tested positive for coronavirus. Now, a cold's coronavirus, not COVID-19, but coronavirus, which is a cold, and she got better. But I don't know anyone. Now, there will be people screaming because they've known people that have died.
Yeah.
But as far as I'm aware, and I know a lot of people, I do not know anyone who has caught this. Like I said, if I compare that to if a cold's going about, I'll know you'll know hundreds of people by the end of the day. They'll just be, oh yeah, he's got it, she's got it,
Right.
and it passes. But you walk down the street here, if there are other people, it's as if you have the plague. They will sidestep you. No one will talk to you. It has caused paranoia.
It's very weird. This has never happened before. I mean, ever. I mean, locally, yeah, it has in certain places, but for the whole world to do something kind of simultaneous like this is unprecedented.
Do you know the strange thing with this is that we got like this institution in the UK called the allotment. An allotment is a piece of ground that you rent off the local authority, and they're all clumped together. Loads of people rent various strips of land in one big area, and they grow vegetables on them, right? It's like a big vegetable growing thing. Some people have chickens, and I've done this for years, for decades. I've grown my own vegetables and whatever. And when I go up to these allotments, these big acreage of land that's split into these individual plots, a little shed on it, and there's none of the young people there. All the old people are still carrying on, and you talk to them, and they're not buying it. They are not buying this coronavirus. They're not having it. They're just saying, no, we're ignoring it. We think it's a nonsense. It is unbelievable how many old people are just not accepting it.
And that's in the city of London where you are right now.
Yeah. Well, it's just outside in the suburb areas, But London is, there are people out, but it is a ghost town on a whole. It's strange. But then people are still commuting on trains to work. They're going on the underground trains, subway trains. They're going on buses.
Yeah, that's what Sam Samward told me. He said that the tubes are still pretty much packed.
Yeah, with people on there. So how does that work? It's inconsistent. My main argument with this is the fact that it's the government don't care for us. They've never cared for us. And if you look at the history of the UK and Europe in general, 100 million people have died in the last 100 years in wars that the UK have been involved or they've instigated. So they're not bothered about their people. They're not bothered about their old people. Dementia, is wiping out our elderly. Cancer is estimated to wipe out a third of us. I mean, I was on the police force for many years, and one of the biggest killers was road deaths. And I was a detective for a couple of years, appointed to the traffic department, and I would turn up at crime scenes where someone's been killed, and we could get 3 deaths in a day. Serious,
just from a traffic accident.
Traffic accidents, they're the biggest killer, and and after that you got suicides and alcoholism and drug addiction and all the other stuff. I mean, that's still going on, and they've never been bothered about it. They didn't even give the old people any sanctions during the cold winters. There was old people dying of the cold in the UK because they couldn't afford to put the heating on.
It's very fluid, multivariable situation, and it is confusing for many reasons, like you said. But I talk to so many smart people. You and I've been watching Sean's videos and just people I follow on Twitter and Facebook, and it seems like everybody has a slightly different opinion or set of feelings about this situation. I do think it's very deadly. Just speaking for myself personally, I know I have at least 3 people in my family who, if they do get this virus and the deadly form of it, they will likely die. But at the same time, I don't think that we are necessarily taking the best steps to prevent this further and kind of assimilate everyone back into society. I think the most important time period I think has already passed, and the opportunity has been missed already. I saw this interview with Nassim Taleb talking about this in the economy and how people are confusing the two and thinking of them as on 2 separate realities, the healthcare and the economy. But
Are there links?
yeah, and they're completely linked. And he was saying that because the U.S. didn't want to pay pennies in January, now they will pay trillions.
Yeah. I mean, and that's right. And they're offering people 80% of their income over here if you're self-employed. But they never cared for anyone. The damage economically this is going to do when people actually do start venturing out their homes. But it's how people have complied and locked themselves away, and the attitude they got to their friends and neighbours. They're not even entertaining each other. Won't let people around their houses. It is really, really bizarre how
Me
we've
too. I
lost
mean,
all.
I don't want to make anything more difficult than it is, but I'm in an area where there's quite a lot of young people, and yeah, it's almost without. I mean, I'm definitely an anomaly. I'm doing something about this. I can't just sit here and do nothing. And I mean, they seem to be more concerned with going to the bar. Like I literally just heard somebody say that this morning. Like when can I go to the bar again? Which is it's cool, if that's what you want to do. But it just kind of gives you an idea of what people's state of mind is over here, where I'm at.
Yeah, I mean, it's our pubs are all shut down over here. That there is no socialising. The restaurants, I mean, they're going to go under. They can't pay their bills. They won't be able to pay their rent. They won't be able to pay their staff, and the coffee shops are all shut. And people aren't going out either, because if they go out, they can't go to the toilet anywhere, because whether they're going to a pub or a cafe to go use the toilet, that's not there. It's we'll wait and see what happens. But I think this is very, very severe. This is drastic.
What do you fear is the worst scenario, John? And what do you hope is the best scenario?
Well, I think people are going to start hurting each other soon. They're going to. I mean, we've been in lockdown now. We're entering nearly enough our 3rd week over here. People are going to start going stir crazy, and there's going to be the queues are getting bigger and bigger at the stores. I think there's going to be a shortage if they start then having power cuts. Parts of the UK have experienced power cuts already. And where does it go? Where is it going to end? I don't know who's doing any work. I mean, how are things actually moving on? The problem is England, the UK, Great Britain was self-sufficient, and then we sort of merged with Europe, and we became a monoculture. We became like the financial sort of capital of the world. We dealt with all the banking and the insurance trading. So a lot of the engineering industry and the farming went. And if you take countries like Latvia, they too were self-sufficient, and now they end up as a monoculture just trading timber. Greece lost all its beef herd because of Europe. So now, there's isolation. The Polish drivers are being quarantined when they're coming from outside countries. So the Polish driver, Poland's a massive powerhouse in Europe. It really is. It's like a bit like Mexico, produces so much, and the hard-working people. And their drivers aren't on our roads anymore. So nothing's being brought in. Spain's on lockdown. You take the southern Spain, the costas, as they call it down there, especially the areas of Almeria, that right down on the bottom, they're the greenhouses of Europe. They produce all the tomatoes, the peppers, the cucumbers. There's no one out. They're all locked away. So, and if they do get a crop, it's not going to be picked. It will spoil, and there's none of the Polish drivers to bring it all over Europe. So, what's going to happen? I mean, we're obviously living on surplus at the moment, but when that runs out, how are people going to get fed? I mean, I'm growing my own, but again, that takes a long time to germinate. And if the local authorities then prevent us from gaining access to what effectively is government land to dig up our produce, and it's wasted.
Yeah, I agree. And you
It's,
guys don't have the problem of guns too to think about, which is a good thing. But another thing to think about is you guys are way more squished together too. So
it's little. I mean, the UK's, I think it's something like the third most densely populated country in Europe. I think Malta's the first, and Malta's the second, and Monaco's the first.
So you don't agree with? I mean, you're supportive of Brexit. It sounds like.
Yeah, I mean, I've never really taken an active role in politics, but yeah, ultimately, yeah. And the European thing, you know, it was an ideology. It seemed to work on paper, but of course, this has happened, and you know, we're not self-sufficient. We rely on each other.
We rely on China for way too much. Like medicine is almost exclusively, and I didn't know any of this. I mean, you know, and maybe I should. So excuse me for that, but most of our medicine is made by the Chinese, and I mean, they have everyone by the balls. It seems right now.
I just can't see how they can have uniformity around the world. You know, we don't get on with each other. You know, especially the UK, we're different from Europe. We even drive on a different side of the road. We've got a different legal system. You know, everything's different over here than it is in Europe. And all of a sudden, everyone's getting on. And then when you look at other countries that have got a different sort of religious dynamics, you know, and you know, again, politically, a totally different, you know, socialist country, communist countries, and everyone's working together. You know, we've fought war after war because of the differences, never ever got on, and now everyone's playing the same game. I don't
Pretending
get it.
like we actually do all get along and everything's hunky dory with 100% of the population.
I just don't get it. It stinks to me. I tell you what, I said to someone the other day. It's a bit like your wife. She's always cheating on you. She hates you. You know, always stealing money from you, and all of a sudden she's being lovely. She's cooking your food.
Yeah, right.
You know,
right?
washing your clothes and doing. And you think, well, you know, what are you after? What's going on? And this is exactly what this is the analogy. And what gets me is how people put their common sense on the shelf when it comes to the government telling us something. And you know, someone said to me, but the government, why would they lie? I said, well, why would they lie about in the 80s when we had acid rain? They said acid rain, you know, the high pH levels of rainfall was going to destroy all the Scandinavian forests in a year. Well, they're still there, and that was in the 80s. They were pulling down the Amazon at a rate of a country the size of Wales per day, and it'll all be gone in 10 years. Well, that was 30 years ago. It's still there. HIV was meant to kill everyone. AIDS was meant to kill everyone. Yeah. You know, I may have known a couple of people that have got it, you know, and then we can go on and on and on. And if you look at Iraq, weapons of mass destruction, they're going to kill us all. The Russians were meant to slit our throats in our sleep, you know, and we can keep going and going and going with it. Lie after lie after lie. So why the hell should we trust them now? And why should they be being benevolent to us when they have raised the age of retirement in the UK to what was 55, then to 60, then to 65. Now it's 70. Wow. You know, we've got the highest.
Speaking of age and hypocrisy, all of our candidates for the presidency this year are in their 70s. And we got this going on. So you have one of the biggest hypocrisies ever. You have the government really concerned, supposedly, about everyone's health and all this, telling people to do social distancing. And all of our possible future leaders who we're going to elect this year, they're all like almost as old as my grandfather, who's in his 80s, which makes no sense. And I saw this interview with Eric Weinstein last night / this morning, and he said, quote, this is not my words, these are his words, Eric Weinstein. He said, quote, now is the time for heads on spikes. That's what he said, end quote. And what do you think about that, John?
Well, what's happening now is the BBC, the British Broadcasting Corporation, our national television sort of unit, was hugely discredited because of Jimmy Savile, this sort of celebrity DJ presenter we had. He was just raping children. He was a rapist par excellence. He was a necrophiliac. He was accused of murdering children and all sorts. He was an absolute wretched man, and basically was hiding behind the BBC and using it as a platform for his abusing.
You know what's ridiculous about this guy, John, is he looks exactly like you would expect him to look.
Yeah.
Let's take a peek at this guy. This guy's real, and everything John is saying here is true, and it's on public record as well, right, John?
And I mean, horrendous guy. He was known about since the 1950s. There were allegations. I mean, police investigations were all shelved around this guy. And again, it was only, posthumously that they actually stated that he was a prolific pedo.
And he was actually introduced to the royal family by Lord Mountbatten. Isn't that correct?
Yeah. Lord Mountbatten, who the FBI have just released a file on. Lord Mountbatten, Louis Mountbatten, who was the uncle to Prince Charles. Prince Charles was best friends with Jimmy Savile.
And Lord Mountbatten was also a pedophile, wasn't he?
Yeah, pedophile. And he was kicked out of India. He was a viceroy of India. He was in the Navy, and he was kicked out for his shenanigans with young boys there. And he was an active pedophile in this country as well. And it's just a massive pedo country, this.
Why do you think that is, John? I was going to ask you that, actually. So that's a great segue. Yeah. Do you think that it's worse than the U.S.? It seems to be.
Yeah. And it's quite funny because I've done a lot with the East European community in the UK. And it's funny, the Lithuanians turn around and say that England is always known as the pedo country. But if you look at our system, this goes back a long way. I'm actually writing a thesis for a book at the moment, and it's going to be an academic piece of work.
Oh wow, that's awesome, John. I was going to ask you if you're going to ever write a book.
Yeah, I'm doing two. I'm writing the sort of autobiography of my life, but also I'm doing one with an academic at the moment, a lady who's an art therapist. She's got a doctorate from Oxford for it, and we're doing. And part of the one thing we're looking at is the UK and child abuse. And when we look at our sacred institutions, our learned institutions, where Prince Charles and where Mountbatten and all the others went to, were what we call public schools. Now, you call public schools, that the public go to in the rest of the world, but our public schools are the high fee paying schools. And they're called public because it was the Public Schools Act in which members of the public had to, by law, have access to these private schools, although they would never be able to afford to go. And every now and then there would be a scholarship, and some little scruff bag from the slums would be sent to these private schools. But what was going on, especially in Eton, which has produced more prime ministers than any other public school in the UK, it's produced 11 prime ministers.
Wow.
Was what they called the fagging system.
And fagging, not as in the cigarettes, right?
Not as in the cigarettes, no. And it would be the older boys had governance for the younger boys. So they were allowed to punish the boys, which usually meant caning. So they would get a very thin piece of stick. Switch, yeah. And they would cane them, and sometimes this was done bare buttocks, and then there was a lot of sodomy where they started raping the boys, and then these lads would grow up and they would then become in charge of they'll be senior boys, and they would have their own fag, which would be a cycle,
just a cycle, right?
And these kids were then put into these fee-paying schools from the age of 4, so there was no sort of matriarchal influence. They were just put in this very sort of very cold environment, and it bred psychopaths, to be honest, and perverts. But when you look at the history of these schools, they were based on gladiatorial schools. They were actually based on the ancient Greek schooling, in which it was a very, very similar system. So this is ancient, and sodomy seems to be the bedrock, the main recipe.
I've done a bit of reading about Greece and the pederasty that went on there. Basically, is they did have these schools, philosophy, martial arts, and physical training, etc. That this went on, and it was
Well,
weird because it was like accepted back then too, wasn't it,
well,
John?
well, it's the same as the UK. It's exactly that. It's accepted. And when you look at a lot of the British comedy, there's always, especially the BBC comedies, when the things like the Blackadder series, if you ever watch them, there is always this sort of sorry about that. I'm just doing a sort of evening job. I've got to open some doors for me.
Oh,
There is
no
always
worries,
this.
John.
Right, just take it straight up, bro. Yeah, all right, man. Just there is always this upper crust reference to sort of what they'd say, taking one for the regiment and things like that, and it basically means to be sodomized.
Mm-hmm.
So it's gone on and on and on. Now the BBC were exposed for their deliberate cover up of Jimmy Savile and other sort of nefarious sort of child abuse shenanigans with various other celebrities.
And
And
that
people,
ties in really well to this coronavirus situation too, because the BBC did that. How can you trust them anymore? So how can you trust
well, you
them
can't.
to report the truth about something
They,
as big as this?
they were proved to be lying over the war in Syria and many other things. And then, and also they were caught out on the 9/11 with Building 7 saying it had fallen when it was still intact. Um, Now, what happened was people were so appalled they stopped paying their licensing fees.
Which is another thing American viewers don't know is you guys pay licensing fees for the BBC, and you have to do it, right? There's no choice.
Well, the reason being, there's always a reason for everything. A
Mm,
television, the old sort of valve set televisions, will receive transmitters. So it's actually a transmission license, right? Because it will transmit a signal, a television. So in order to transmit a signal in the UK, you need a license. So that's what it is. It's actually a receiver transmission license. But the fees, the money raised was going to the BBC and funding it. So people stopped paying it, and they were paying it on the preface that their money was going on to fund criminality, which is an offence in its own right. So people were saying, "Well, how do I know that my money's not going to fund criminality?"
and do
If
you
a guy,
agree with that assessment?
yeah, it's perfectly right. So people were saying, "Right, we're not paying it," and there was nothing they could do, and they were getting the license fees written off, and millions were doing it. Literally millions. So they were looking at getting rid of the license fee this year. Now, all of a sudden, the BBC has become the focal point of people's point of reference to what's going on globally.
Mm-hmm.
So they're tuning in, and also when you're looking at convenience stores and supermarkets, they too were really coming down. There's a couple of big ones in the UK, and they were looking at crumbling because
Yeah.
these independent ones were doing a better job. Now the independent ones are folded. The big corporations are back on top again.
Mm-hmm.
And this is honestly, and it's amazing what it's done. It's covered up all the child abuse stuff in one foul swoop. I don't think we will ever get the momentum going. We were looking at really changing the face of British politics and policing for what was being exposed and what we were all doing together. That
Well,
stopped overnight.
I hope you're wrong, John. And I know that you are coming from a place of a bit of exasperation right now, as we all are. But I do agree. I think it seemed to me that the ring was closing, and the alternative media, such as yourself and everyone else who is in that sphere, was playing a big role in it. And I do think that they are taking this crisis and running with it, the elites, because it wasn't just your line of work that I think that the ring was closing, but just the basic level of trust that people should have for the news and the government that has been eroding. And it seemed to me that it just kept collapsing. And now they're
Well,
using this crisis to try to
well,
everything back up at once.
yeah, and they're doing it. I mean, the royal family, they were on the level of dog shit about 2 months ago. And they were finished. They were gone. They were history. Honestly,
Mm.
they were history. And this was all due to the Epstein stuff.
Mm.
Now all of a sudden the Queen's back in the paper saying we're all in this together, we'll all fight this, and it's that old sort of British sort of Dunkirk spirit, old chap from the
Yeah.
First and Second World
Mm.
War.
Brave but somewhat foolish British stereotype, right?
Oh, I mean, the British were a really tough race. You go to
Oh
the
yeah, you
First
guys
World War,
are definitely.
and we were a mixed race. we called us a mongrel breed. We came from all over the place. Our military would survive in the deserts, in the jungles, in the Arctic. We were absolutely formidable. But over the period of the last 100 years, they have ground us down into morons. I remember when I was in the police, you'd have these photographs on the walls of the old police stations, and they'd be going back to the 1900s, and if you looked at them, they were all hard men. Some had come back from the campaigns of the First World War, all big mustachio chaps, but lean, tough, wiry, steely-eyed men. And if you look at the state of the police officers now, oh my God, I mean, it's like the Muppet Show. One will be 7 foot tall, one will be 4 foot. The obesity is all full,
Yeah. And I never look for trouble from officers. I do respect the office, but I think it was in the airport, or I can't remember where I was, but I don't know if they were police officers or security guards, so keep that in mind. But there was like 2 or 3 of them, and they probably outweighed me 6x altogether.
Oh yeah, it's just unbelievable, and you think, how has that been allowed? But it is. It's just a slow erosion. We had good family values. They're gone, man. And to see a couple now get married and have children, it's just a rarity. And the level of ignorance amongst the British, it's just appalling. It really is. It's just turned into a moronic race, and it is a shame. It is such a shame. We were real lions, and we were. And they've just done it, and they've done it on purpose. And do you know why they did it? Because we were such a formidable force of people, the British, and we were resilient. And the people that post Second World War, where they basically were starving, living on nothing, but all got together, rebuilt the country. That's gone. That is long gone. That died out with my grandparents.
Yeah, there's only a handful of those guys left, unfortunately. But a little bit of good news in this state, in Oregon, there was a man who, World War II veteran, he defeated the Nazis, and he just defeated coronavirus as well. So that's really good news.
There's still 1 or 2 out there, but it's and people just accepting what they're told, and that. Look, I no doubt that there is this horrible flu bug going around. It's killing people. I'm not denigrating anyone, because there's people that have lost their businesses that are incredibly angry, and they'll be angry at people like me that are going out on the streets and carrying on. They'll be angry because they'll be saying that it's down to people like me that are causing their businesses to fold because they're extending, or there's an indefinite time, that we're still locked in. There'll be people that, if they're children get sick, they'll accuse people like me of being a carrier and all that. I get that. I totally get that. I'm on board with you. You're not my enemy. My enemy is the government. I think they're lying to us on such a massive
man,
scale.
I don't believe them at all. And the negligence with the mask thing, and I know I'm coming back to it, but it's such a basic thing. It's almost like saying 2 + 2 is not 4. And just don't worry about it type of thing, because in Asia they understand this, and that's why they wear masks. And what enforces and informs this is the fact that their geography is, they just have way less geographical space than even England does, a country like Japan or other countries in Asia where they do have a lot more high population density. They understand masks as a necessity to commuting. And when you have the leader of basically the healthcare, sphere of the Western world, because I do think that you guys do look to the US still, and not just you, other countries, is lying and saying that masks don't really do a whole lot. I mean, you don't have to force people to wear them. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying tell people the truth. And to do the opposite and to lie is, to me, that's murderous in this situation.
Well, the other thing they're saying now is that they're rolling out. It's really strange, because the BBC News made a big deal, and they were attacking conspiracy theorists on Facebook. I can see them shutting down Facebook, shutting down the internet. I can see that happening. And the reason being is this growing campaign in the UK about the rollout of 5G, and saying that 5G is so detrimental to health that the telecoms utility companies are classed as key workers, and they are flat out working, installing 5G towers, even on a Sunday, throughout all of this lockdown. And they are. There's been a couple that have been set fire to. I know in Hong Kong they're pulling them down. This is starting to happen in the UK. And what people are saying is that they're locking us down so they can roll out 5G, which will actually destroy us once that goes live.
I'm seeing that all over my Twitter because of the a lot of British journalists that I am following, like Sonia Poulton and Sean. And what is the significance of that, John? And what are the concerns about 5G?
Well, because 5G it's a very, very powerful microwave signal, and it's detrimental to health. And it's got to be, I think it's almost in line of sight, so, but anything in way of that passage is pulled down, so that they've sliced down trees all over the place, so we've lost millions and millions of trees. They're putting it out, and the strange thing is, and this when they say it's a conspiracy, we got to look at this. They cannot, the local authorities, so the local governments throughout the UK, which all come under the banner of central government, local governments, they have to authorise permission to install these, planning permission to install these towers. And they're granting the permission, but there's an offence of malfeasance in a public office. It's basically corruption. These towers cannot get insured. Underwriting insurers will not insure these towers because they have been proved to be dangerous. Right, so they are putting up uninsured equipment, that makes them vicariously liable for any damage, and they shouldn't be allowed to do it. So it's like driving an uninsured car. It's not allowed in the UK. You cannot drive an uninsured car on a public road,
especially an uninsured, dangerous car.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So this is what's happening, and it has been proved to be harmful to life. So it's not only is this malfeasance in a public office on a grandiose scale, there's also offences under the Environmental and Wildlife Crime Act.
What do you think their objective is in installing 5G, John?
Well, I mean, the devil does things for many reasons. So it may well be on the front of it that it's going to give us faster internet. It's going to compete with fibre optic. It's going to get rid of copper, because a lot of our telecoms still run on copper in the UK, which is corroding, and some of it's 100 years old.
Oh wow!
And it's a lot easier to put a microwave signal out than to put, because the UK, a lot of stuff we bury it. So we put tunnels in and we put ducting in. A lot of the rest of the world, they put poles in. We don't do that in the UK. We sort of tunnel everything. So it's cheaper for that reason. And everyone wants faster internet. They want everything quick. So that's going to be one side of it. But there's another rumor that this will kill people. Yeah. And maybe that's their agenda. I mean, you're going into the deep conspiracy sort of realms there. But then again, you've got other people, that are sort of au fait and very on board with the biblical text, are saying that this is a biblical prediction. This is an end times prediction.
Yeah, I've heard that too. I've talked to people personally that think this is the end times.
Yeah. And there's a lot of Christian stuff going out there, being put out there. I mean, and you sit there and you listen to it, you think, I mean, I'm a detective, that was my job for many years. And one of the rules of investigating is you've got to look at evidence that goes towards a suspect and evidence that goes away from a suspect. You will deal with a victim and you will deal with the suspect. So you get both sides of the story. So when you listen to one side of it, you get 50% of the truth. You listen to the other, you get the other side. So, it's good to take a neutral stance sometimes, not sit on the fence, but look at both arguments. Yeah. And when you get evidence that these things cannot be insured, that should ring alarm bells. That really should. But they're never going to admit to this, But history is full of it, especially military campaigns where the government has lied about what's gone on. But I don't know. This is beyond me. This is beyond my comprehension. This is bigger than me. I don't know. I have no answers for this. In respect to conspiracy theories, look, I've been at the center of a conspiracy. There was a conspiracy to take me down for speaking out. So yes, they do exist. Conspiracies are part of British law. They're part of global law. You can conspire to commit murder. And it's a very strange thing. The only people who can't conspire under British law are husband and wife. You can't conspire if you're husband and wife, but two or more people in concert that are plotting, what we class as an arrestable offence, they commit a conspiracy.
What do you mean husband and wife can't conspire?
Husband and wife cannot commit an act of conspiracy under British law.
Really?
Yeah. I think that comes out of a duress issue, but
okay.
that's just how it is. So if you get brother and sister getting together to commit a murder, conspiring, yep. But if you get husband and wife doing it, no, it'd be an individual indictment and not a joint enterprise.
So you mean the husband would get indicted? That's what you're saying.
Well, they both will, but not as a joint enterprise.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Okay, but they won't get charged jointly. Okay.
No. There won't be a conspiracy. There won't be. So conspiracies do exist, but then again, you can get carried away. I mean, I do what I do, and I get conspiracy theorists always attacking me, saying Jon Wedger works for the intelligence services. Jon Wedger's doing this, and they're nutcases.
Yeah, I've gotten a few of them on my channel actually because of you, John. So I have that to thank for you. Thank you.
You will do, yeah, and it is like a coronavirus that follows me around. It's the
Wedger virus.
Yeah, it does. And I said to Sean Atwood, I said, Sean, you watch it now, you're going to get trolled because you've had. And because I speak out against satanic ritual abuse, and that's where it comes from. But again, if I upset a Satanist and if I upset a paedophile, I really am. I don't care, and I'm doing a good job, and I'll live with that, and I'll be proud of myself for that. So
definitely,
and it has been proved that sort of the mainstay of the people that have attacked me have got some sort of very sort of checkered past, and there's been one or two of them, the main antagonists against me, that have been investigated for offences, sexual offences, and offences against children. So,
I believe it. If you think about it dispassionately, why would anybody be against protecting children? So the fact that they're going out of their way and expending time and energy to stop someone or slow someone down who's doing that says a lot.
Yeah, and it's also a satanic trait as well. When I talk to quite a few ex-Satanists, and they will say that they would deliberately get involved with various church groups, Christian churches, and they would get involved just to disrupt it and bring it down. One woman said that her and her guy would get involved. The guy would get involved with the church and then start fundraising for them, do the bookkeeping, and he would then just ruin all their accounts. And the woman, her job was to get in amongst the church community and have affairs with as many men as she could.
Yeah. It seems like everybody almost collectively is talking about stuff along these lines, John, whether it's dark energy, dark forces, the cabal, communism. Many people are thinking about it in different ways, but it seems that there's kind of like a collective awareness growing because of this.
Well, if you look, I mean, you got to look at what's happened in sort of living memory. We had the Nazis and they rounded up the Jews, and you think, well, not just the Jews, the Gypsies. They rounded up the Catholics. They rounded up
Christians.
Sort of Christians,
disabled people,
children of alcoholics, Down syndrome, and you think, how did they do it? And do you know how they did it? Exactly how people are doing it now.
Yeah, very slowly, very, very slowly.
People just buying in to what they're being told. You're getting police forces in the UK. We've got 43 different police forces. They're all standard police forces, though. We haven't got like sort of Europe has. They've got like paramilitary forces, and that we've got just our normal, local policing authorities, which all get together and police the whole of the UK. We've got 43 of them, and they're putting apps that you can download, and then you can really inform a snitch on your neighbours. So you can say, someone say, Jon Wedger's gone out, walked his dog twice today, and grass me up. And
and I think one thing that people don't realize is there is so much more of us than there is of them, isn't there?
Oh, we could stop this in a heartbeat. But they prey on individuals, and they just turn around and say this could affect you, your children. Yeah, and that's how they've done it. This is well planned. This is just too much of a work of genius.
Yeah. What I'm afraid of, and I only say this because this is a pattern I've noticed in the history books I've read and stuff that I've seen, as far as, any history TV show or material, is some sort of Night of the Long Knives scenario where they just keep pushing and keep pushing and keep pushing until they wait, and then they wait until everybody's asleep, and then they all come. And that's what the Nazis did. Night of the Long Knives. There's always like the coup transition, right? Initiation, and that's what I fear, is that they're going to push people to slowly allow their civil liberties to be given away. And this is something I was going to mention earlier when you were talking, John. It seems to me, tell me what you think about this, that us Westerners, not necessarily you or I, we take our liberty for granted.
Yeah, I mean, if you take the two countries that are really sort of heavily sort of burdened with the coronavirus, Italy and Spain. Now, Italy and Spain, you've got to look at the parallels. What makes them alike? They're socialist countries, and they've both got. They're the only two countries in Europe that have paramilitary police forces. It's banned under European rule to have a paramilitary police force. The Spanish have the Guardia Civil, which was Franco's personal bodyguards.
Yeah,
which is still, and they've got. There's no complaints procedure with these guys. These are a paramilitary, and Italy has got the Carabinieri.
I Carabinieri, yeah.
Yeah, exactly the same. So they police by force. The UK, we police by consent. We're a consensual police force, right? And in Europe, the presumption is one of guilt. In the UK, as in America, it's a presumption of innocence. It's common law. So there's two different, spheres that we're working with, totally and utterly different. So it's a lot easier for them in Italy and in Spain to really steam into people, and they will do as they're told. Whereas over here, the French are pretty on board. The French are still going out in the streets and protesting. They are not having it.
Really?
Yeah, they're still out there. They are protesting. They are against it. And
aren't the French always protesting?
Yeah, they protest against. They argue with themselves in the mirror, don't they? They're, but power to them. Power to them but if you look at Poland before the Nazi occupation was flooded with really, really cheap vodka, and the same if you speak to the Irish before, like the British occupation. Over in Southern Ireland, it was flooded with cheap alcohol.
What's the significance of that?
Well, it just subdues people, because Queen Victoria said, if you give a man beer, you'll never have a revolution. So, and if you look at what the British did when they needed to take over strategic outposts during the build-up to their empire, they went into Hong Kong in Kowloon, and they started trading the dock workers with opium, and hence the opium wars. So they were paying the dockers in opium, and they were all smacked off their heads. They were useless. They were worthless. They weren't fit for purpose. And then the British military went out there and just smashed them all over the place because they were no good. And if you look at what they've done to us as a warrior race that are the British, they've turned us into fat-gutted, drop-shouldered morons, thick idiots.
It seems really planned out, doesn't it? The kind of demonizing of strong masculine presence and behavior and attributes and physicality. Because when you do subdue the warrior class, it's easy to control the populace, isn't it?
Well, and you've got to look at the British. I mean, they're the masters of control. You look at the Caribbean islands, and you look at East Africa, they needed to take them over. And so what they did was they went and took a very small percentage of the Indian populace, which were the Sikhs, the Sikh religion. These were warriors classes, farming. They call them the Irishmen of India because they're big, tough farm workers. But they were very, very loyal to Queen Victoria during the Raj. So she rewarded them by giving them these posts, and the Sikhs were then sent out to countries like Uganda and Kenya, and then they went off to Trinidad and Tobago, The Caribbean call them the coolies because they were the Indians, the Asians that went out there and managed the economy, and they were used because of their loyalty. But they're a very, very small percentage of the population, and even now, if you go to India, especially the Punjab region, the military, the top echelons of the Indian military and the police are Sikhs.
Wow, because of that, in all those years ago.
Because of the fact that they are warriors and they're very loyal to and the British did it. They got the Nepalese, the Gurkhas.
Yep.
Because these were tough little Sherpas, that just wouldn't give in. And the British
I watched a documentary on the Gurkhas actually on New Year's Eve, right after I said bye to Pepsi at London Bridge. I went back and watched a documentary on the Gurkhas, and the Gurkhas are from Nepal, and they have been fighting for the British for over 100 years, I think. Highly trained warriors, and their expertise during World War II was knives. They had these kind of long...
kukris.
What is it called?
It's called a kukri.
Kukri. Okay.
Kukri, yeah. I mean, there's just been a case go through the courts. I think it was the war crimes courts, and it was during the Iraq war. No, the Afghani conflict, where a British Army officer and a sergeant from the Gurkhas took, I think it was a machine gun nest or something like that. They took out a load of snipers.
Oh, I saw that, and he got the highest award by the British Army, didn't he?
Well, what happened was it's typical sort of because their first language is in English. I don't know what dialect of Indian they speak, but anyway, the British Army officer basically made a comment that when he gets hold of the snipers, he'll put his head on a plate. And the Gurkha took it literally, and when he went in there, he actually beheaded the guy. Actually took his head off with a kukri, and it's just gone through the courts, and it was found that the bloke was found, it wasn't an international war crime. He just was following orders, and it was a figure of speech. I'll have your head for this, literally. Or something like that. Yeah, he took it literally, and I'll have his head for this, like they say. And he went and cut his head off, but very bright. But the British have used people always, because we're a very, very small race, and if you look at what we've conquered globally, I mean,
it's quite amazing. When you look at the extent that the British Empire captured, the sun never set on it, right? That was the saying.
But not only that, the greatest navy. I mean, if you ever get to watch, if you're into military history, there's a brilliant documentary called The Berlin to Baghdad Railway. And
write it down.
It's actually the Orient Express, and it was a railway line that was built by the Iraqis and the Germans just prior to First World War, and it was actually going to fuel the industrial machine in Berlin with oil and not coal. And Winston Churchill was in charge of the Navy, and he wasn't happy with that, and he bombed it. And they went out, they sent the Dorset Regiment just prior to the First World War, and they went and ripped up this railway line just outside of, I think they went to somewhere in Iraq, Kirkuk or somewhere like that. But they were the railway line was 60 miles away from completion outside of Aleppo in Syria.
Oh,
and
wow.
That's really,
that would have changed everything.
Well, the inference there was that was the start of the First World War, not the murder of
Archduke Ferdinand.
Ferdinand. It was just no one's that important. But when you look at the Berlin to Baghdad Railway, you sit there and think, yeah, that makes so much sense. It was about oil. And it's about oil. And 100 years later, it was about oil. Again, weapons. It's all, they've always lied to us. Why the hell are they doing us a favor now? It doesn't make any sense to me. It really doesn't.
I'm not buying it.
No, look, in this country, they want the old people to work till they're 70. So why are they paying fit, strong people to sit indoors and do nothing? It makes no sense. They brought in migrant workers from every corner of Eastern Europe. England is one big construction site at the moment. The only country in Europe where property prices never slumped in the last 20 years, where everywhere else went into recession. We kept increasing.
Why is that?
don't know, we become the financial. They want us to be like Hong Kong, I suppose, where it's just unbelievable the prices of. I mean, I've seen it in my house, you know, in the London area. My children will never own a house because it's just ridiculous. We can't. They can't. But I mean, I own mine. But
I
it's
was
gone
talking
up.
to some dudes when I was in London last time, and yeah, they're like, I mean, it's almost impossible to find a flat to stay in now. And we grew up here in London. We're from London.
Well, where I am now, this block of flats, they're £3 million a flat, and they're tiny. £3 million a flat is just incredible, and there's nothing special about them. But
Yeah.
you
Well,
know,
it's your house, John. It's your flat.
well, I'm not living. No, this is a job I'm doing at the moment.
Oh,
Just
okay. I was
helping
gonna
someone
say
out.
that's what makes it special.
A security place, you know, but I live, you know, just a short distance from it. But
okay, gotcha.
you know, that they're dragging people in left, right, and centre to work, and all of a sudden they want them to sit indoors and do nothing. It just, I don't get it. I really, really don't get it.
So you don't have a theory on what the end game is yet?
Well, it'll be a financial collapse, and it'll be a land grab and a financial collapse. And we've already had our former Prime Minister Gordon Brown go on about this. We need a world government, you know, which
He's
is
a
what Hitler,
globalist.
well, which is what Hitler wanted, and so many others. So they're getting it, aren't they? They're getting it. You think what you had with the Britain, we've got fantastic intelligence services, right? But then they were incredibly successful during the Second World War, and the rest of the world, they torture people. Now torture works initially. The fear of torture is worse than torture itself, because once you kick the crap out of someone, what more are you going to do? You know, once someone's hurt, they're hurt, you know, and then they get to a point where they don't care. I mean, like what the police did to me, they destroyed me in every way they could. They got to a point where they did so much bad to me, I weren't bothered about them. I lost all my fear. And this is what happens with torture. But what the British would do, they would get the Germans or the Italians or whoever they had a problem with, and they would feed them and give them a nice room, you know, warm room, let them associate with each other, but they would drag them off for interrogation, knowing damn well that they had no interest in what they were going to tell them. And then once they interrogated them, they put them into the general population again, but they audio monitored everything. So they would get together and start talking, saying, look, they asked me this, and I didn't tell them this because this is where we're really going, but not there. And I've lied to them, and they think, and all they would do is just sit there and listen. And so they got it by being nice to people. And there's a thing, and we found it in the training that you know I got, and I went on to dish out when it was come to interrogation, because I've become an expert in interview skills and interrogation. And there's a thing called reciprocity, and reciprocity means I do something nice for you, you have no option but to do something nice for me. You owe me. So as nice as I can be to you, when it comes to me to ask you questions, you're going to find it very difficult,
right?
To lie to me. You won't want to. You will lie, and you may make no comment, but you will be very uncomfortable in doing it. And then you just play on that, and in the end, you know, with various bouts of NLP, as it were, you can, you know, start to find a weakness in someone's character and attack it.
Yeah,
But you don't.
NLP, neuro linguistic programming.
Yeah, and it was very live and well with the stuff we dealt with. But you know, the rest of the world, they would kick the crap out of people, you know. But it doesn't work. It doesn't get what's needed. But the British were very good, and they did it by very sneaky means. And you know, and so they know what they're doing. They know exactly what they're doing. So we'll wait and see. But
well, let's keep our channel and just lines of communication open, John, because I think it's important that we look after each other as citizens of sister countries, don't you?
Of course. Now, what I've been saying to people, let's have predictions. Let's have weekly predictions. So, our first prediction was that we're going to start to be locked down in the UK, and sure enough, it happened. And the next prediction was like public meetings, and then food shortages, which is what we're happening. I predict there's going to be power cuts. I predict there might be water will start being rationed if this goes on anymore, and there's going to be more and more police, you know, presence on the street, and basically stopping anyone really going to work. That's what I think is going to happen. I might be wrong, but do you know what's going to happen? We're going to find out. Either way, we will find out. I don't know anyone who has died from coronavirus. I've heard of one person that's had it. There's a lot of third party stuff. A friend of a friend knows someone, a friend, and all that. But I'm just gauging it on when I get a cold. If I get a cold, and there's a good chance my neighbour will have a cold or someone at work will have it. But here, I don't know of anyone.
Nothing yet.
Nothing yet. But I would say the next couple of weeks we're going to find out what's going to happen. And I would say my prediction is, like I said, power cuts, a lot more food shortage, probably public disorder will take place. Maybe the military will be put on the streets of the UK. And the 5G will start to be rolled out, and we'll wait and see. But either way, we're going to find out. We're going to find out what their agenda is. And if it's nefarious, let's hope it's not too late down the line for us to sort of exercise our democratic right.
And how can we do that, John? What is in our power?
Well, it's difficult because I've been shut down doing my podcasts, so I can't do them anymore. And
on Facebook, you mean, John?
Facebook, yeah.
Well, John, you can, anytime you want to talk to me, I am on Pacific Coast time. I usually wake up about 7 or 8, and the rest of the day I'm pretty much online. So I am free to chat with you whenever you would like to, sir. And Mr. Sam Samworth has been chatting with me several times this week. He does it in the evenings, much earlier. Before he goes to bed a lot earlier than you do, so we chat actually earlier in the day. But if you are open to chatting again, any day, just let me know, John. Even if it is for 20 minutes.
I would say let's do weekly updates on the state of what's going on in the capital, that is London.
Definitely.
And to see, because I think the situation next week will be different from what it is today, and we'll see it. But if there is a nefarious agenda, we are going to find out one way or the other. I might be wrong,
I hope you're wrong, John, but I know you're a smart man, and you know your country well. You know it inside and out, especially at the governmental level.
All I will say is something smells rotten about this. This does not feel right. It really doesn't. I spoke to my friend in the police, and he said, we haven't been briefed on anything. So even the police haven't been told. And he said the detectives, most of them have been sent home.
It sounds like a huge psyop, a huge gaslighting attempt, doesn't it?
Well, we just don't know what's going on.
We don't know.
But people are just taking it. And I just think people have just got so browbeaten in this country. And then they've lost the will to sort of protest. And I think we've just lost the plot in the UK. We've lost our fight. And they've done it to us deliberately. So, if they're going to walk over any country, they'll probably walk over this one first, because we're asleep. We're in a
Who's
coma.
They, John?
I don't know. The global government, whoever they are, God knows. I mean,
do you think they're communists?
Well, we're seeing a lot of parallels to communism. We're seeing people informing on their neighbours left, right, and centre, and that there seems to be no solidarity with anyone. They seem to be agreeing with.
Same here. I mean, you would think, and I understand people are stressed, but I kind of mentioned it sideways earlier. But just dealing with kind of roommates of friends and just young people around here, people aren't cooperating, and I don't get it. I just don't understand. I understand people are afraid and stressed, but now I think is the time more than ever when we, as fellow Americans, fellow Westerners, and Britons alike, I think should come together.
We're a Christian nation. You never hear any reference to Jesus. If you go to an Islamic state, there will be references to Allah everywhere. If you go to Hindu, you will see their deities everywhere. There's just nothing. When communism become atheistic because they weren't allowed to believe in these things, it become, the state was their sole deity and focus of attention. And that's pretty much what's happened here. We've lost our faith, and we've turned our back on God. And the devil's, doing what he wants, and no one's been bothered to get in the way. That's how I see it. So we'll wait and see. But if I could give a little update on our good man, Mr. Adam Pepsi Watson.
Oh yes, please do, Mr. Wedger. We would love to hear anything you may know. And I've been doing update videos this week. So anybody who wants to check those out can. I will put them on the description box, and they're on my channel as well. But yes, please, Mr. Wedger.
A brief rundown. Adam has been interned in prison. He's been remanded in prison without trial. He's subject to a very antiquated and now sort of defunct bit of legislation, which means if he commits an offence, he could serve up to 90 years in prison. He's been recalled because there was some allegations made against him due to harassment, which haven't been proved. Again, you know, that's not for me to comment on. That'll be for him and his accuser to comment on. But either way, Adam was a solid and staunch anti-child abuse campaigner, and we was really moving things forward. And his assistance in what I was doing was invaluable. He ended up being taken to a private prison in South London, where he was actually getting on with his life.
Thameside.
Yeah, Thameside, HMP Thameside. He was actually engaged in tutoring the illiterate prisoners, because there is a high illiteracy rate within the prison population in the UK. I think it's something like 80% illiteracy in the under 21s on the lower category prisons. He was then being taken to a higher category prison to do mentoring and counselling works. He's a trained counsellor, and his life was sort of moving on. We had a letter writing campaign. He is now he was receiving a lot of letters, and at the end of it, if we could just sort of endorse that please keep his letters coming to him. He's been moved to a prison which is a category B, a more serious prison, just outside of London, called HMP The Mount, in a town called Hemel Hempstead. The prison is in absolute dire straits. In his words, it's at the point of eruption. They are on 23.5-hour lockdown. He's saying it's just constant banging on the cell doors. The inmates have lost the plot. The suicides are going through the roof. They're actually flooding their own cells in order to even get to the corridor, just to see other people, or just to see a longer sort of focal point, because they are stuck in these tiny sort of cages 23 hours a day. And he said it is absolutely appalling, and he doesn't know how long he's going to last there. He's asking for books to be sent, and more importantly, letters to be sent to himself. Oh, one sec.
No problem, John. So as I don't think I mentioned it yet, folks, but this episode of Across the Pond with Jon Wedger is sponsored by Crime and Justice TV. Crime and Justice TV, CEO'd by Pepsi Watson. Across the Pond, Jon Wedger, Scotland Yard detective and whistleblower. Be sure to follow Mr. Wedger on Twitter at Wedger_John.
Right, so I'm back with you.
Thanks, John.
Right, back with you. Sorry, I just had to deal with something. But anyway, look, I'll be in touch, Ads, and then
definitely. Thank you, John, for that update.
Let's do weekly updates.
Okay, just we'll figure out something next week, and whatever would work for you, Mr. Wedger. Thank you so much, everyone, for listening. Ciao, John. Appreciate it.
See you later.
That is it for this episode Across the Pond. Ciao.